to develop more our own kind of media and using what we have there for sure, but also developing our own kind of media, our own way of reaching out to at least activists, but trying to reach out to the general public.
Thank you.
I want to talk about a good news story. Okay. For the past 3 years, I've been working with a group that's now called Democracy for New Brunswick. We got our start in November of 2009 when Premier Grant announced the sale of NB Power. Immediately, a group of 20 people met at the Fredericton Inn to talk about the content of the Memorandum of Understanding, which had been completely secretive. We had to threaten a suit under the Freedom of Information Act just to get a copy of the document. But after reading and getting some expert opinion on the agreement, we were convinced that A, the government had used really bad democratic process, and that the outcome of the sale of NB Power was going to primarily benefit a small group of big business. So it was a bad process and not in the public interest. So we started strategizing about how we could educate the public and mobilize resistance to the deal. We called the group NB Power Not for Sale, and through the use of social and print media and signs on most telephone poles, we drew attention to the issue, and as a result, we were able to mobilize 35,000 New Brunswickers to sign petitions, come to 2 demonstrations at the legislature, and eventually the government withdrew the deal. And so this is a tremendous, public power, use of public power for the public good, and that's a wonderful story. And I'm proud to have been a part of that, but it's terribly encouraging because 20 people sat in that original meeting, and it's amazing that we were able to mobilize the resistance that we did and kill the deal. It also killed the Liberal Party in the next election. Okay? Yay! So after, following that, we said, look, okay, now that we've got some public interest and we've got the attention of the media, how can we use this power that has been exerted by the public? And we said, why don't we? There's a provincial election coming up, so why don't we identify what we consider to be important democratic issues? And we identified 9 questions that we pulled out of the Commission on Democratic Reform that was produced for the Lord government, but was never enacted because they lost the election in 2004, yes. Okay. So we said, okay, what about if we create a report card and we say to all 5 of the parties that were a party to this last election, what if we, in a series of monthly reports, we get all the 5 parties to respond to the 9 questions about democratic issues? And it's amazing. We got the attention of all 5 of those parties. Eventually, all of them gave us a complete platform about those things. Some of them had no intention of doing anything about it, but at least it forced their hand on it. So prior to the election, we were able to tell the public, if you vote for this party, we can tell you what their position is on these issues. And let me just briefly tell you what the issues were. The first one was making your vote count. In order to make every vote count, we wanted the adoption of the recommendation from the Commission on enacting a system of electoral reform for proportional representation. Secondly, that you have to, with an independent electoral boundaries commission, you've got to organize the boundaries so that the ridings are have relatively the same number of voters in that. Third, that there be fixed election dates. Now that problem was solved already by the Graham government brought that in. The next was enhancing the role of MLAs and what are you going to do about enhancing the role of MLAs and the legislature, improving democracy within the political parties, and transparency in the appointments to agencies, boards, and commissions. And then finally, making your voice heard. We want a new referendum act, which is almost there now, increased citizen engagement in important decisions, and a stronger voice for women, youth, and Aboriginal people. And all of the parties told us what their position was on those issues. So in a series of media reports, we were able to tell the public, here are the issues, and these are the positions that the parties have taken. Now, so following that success, we transformed ourselves into Democracy for New Brunswick, and what we're doing now is we're working on the issue of proportional representation and have been meeting with the Premier in order to create the conditions by which a referendum can be held on electoral reform. We're not there yet, but at least we're invited to the party. Okay? And it's a direct result of public power, the exercise of public power for the public good. And then when we talk later about where do we go from here, I want to talk about how you can use this model for us to together work on some public policy issues.
Thank you, Ray. That wasn't me.
It's Janice's cell phone.
Way at the back in my pocket.
Okay, there.
Sorry.
Okay, so changes that we can make. I'm trying to sort of think about these in 3 different kinds of categories. This is why I use a lot of tables when I'm thinking and drawing, is because I like to put things in categories. I think that there are some changes that I would start as calling something along the line of pull factors, and I would think about those as organizations and networks that we can build that start to draw a response, right? So again, I think Democracy for New Brunswick is an example of this. As opposed to trying to work with existing infrastructure, you sort of set up a fringe arrangement, and then that starts to draw participation towards you. Our Fredericton is another example of that. Our work with 21 Inc., I think in many ways was an example of that too, because as young New Brunswickers, we didn't feel as though there was a place where diverse young people could come together to talk about different versions of the future. And so we've been really intentional about seeing leadership in the arts community, and seeing leadership in the public sector, and seeing leadership amongst community and nonprofit organizations. And typically, leadership conversations often tend to be usurped and thought about sort of in very particular, more formal ways. So, and I think we're having some success in pulling the definition of leadership in that way. So then another way to think about things that we can do, I would talk about and think about, is push factors. And largely that connects to the kind of work that we can do with young people. So I have a particular interest in the ways that we can use real life examples in classrooms, in organizations, and have young people using those real life problems as teaching and learning opportunities, so that they start to identify themselves as having a role to play in society. Because if you couple the idea of education with the idea of citizenship and the idea of leadership, then you start to produce a population that doesn't just see itself as being complacent parts of a system, and rather sees themselves as actually being able to have public mechanisms that they can use. But that requires a lot of intentional effort, and it requires a really, really thoughtful use of a variety of resources as part of an education model. And we work, so my closest experience of that is with my work at Renaissance College, but I would also say that there are a lot of opportunities and really exciting examples of really innovative and creative public school teachers who believe really strongly in that work too. So, and then the other kind of category is what are the kinds of things we can address within the existing structure. So the one that I want to pick up on, because I think that I think it's important to recognize that the kind of work of participatory democracy is actually a totally different skill set, it's a different set of knowledge, and it's a different set of attitudes than what we are used to training and celebrating. And so I actually think that I don't mean this to sound in any, okay. So in my work with the poverty reduction process, one of the things that became abundantly clear was that there wasn't a lot of emphasis in the skills of facilitation within the role of, so we don't manage public sector or private sector, or to be fair, university sector. We don't manage anybody for their ability to build collaborations and relationships, right? We manage other things that are peripheral to that. And so in any kind of work environment, you have to incent and train for and then manage for the kinds of skills and knowledge and attitudes that allow all of this kind of work to happen. So that is sort of a very specific way that we could be thinking about ways to make changes in terms of how much participatory democracy is possible. So lots of people and politicians that I have spoken with will genuinely say, I hear you, I don't really know how to do that. I don't really know how to make that happen. So, and I don't think that that's always, I mean, I think it can be easy to be dismissive of that and say, oh, you're just saying that. But I'm trying hard to believe that in some cases there are things that I don't know how to do. And I'm not likely to try them because I don't know how to do them. I don't want to make a fool of myself, right? So I think that we have to take that seriously and think about what are the ways we can work on some of those issues as well.
I'm going to compensate for having taken too much time before by taking less this time. So what can we do? What can we do given the problems that we're facing? Well, I think one thing that we can do, and that has been discussed here, we have elites who are dominating the conversations, whether they're professional experts or also unprofessional experts, or spheres where political debate take place are, as Jean-Claude and Roy pointed out, and others, dominated by business interests. One thing I think that we, as citizens, can do is to start conversations ourselves elsewhere, in other settings. And this is something actually that I have learned a lot about recently here in Fredericton, from my students at St. Thomas and from the Occupy movement last fall. My students, I as a student myself, only a few short years ago really, was very concerned about the rising cost of tuition, and was involved in some activism around that, and kind of cut my teeth banging, well, mixed metaphors here, but basically banging my head against a brick wall, finding that a lot of people were pretty apathetic about this, or that, yeah, they thought, yeah, tuition fees, terrible thing, but, you know, this is something that comes from up high, and there's nothing really we can do about it. You know, poor turnouts to student rallies and things like this, which I found obviously very disappointing, and I'm sure that many of you have had similar experiences in social movements where you know you're right and you've got all kinds of verve and what have you, and then no one shows up. And it's very deflating. It's extremely deflating. When I got here, I found that, you know, students here had a lot of the same problems that my generation of students faced, except maybe multiplied by however much tuition has gone up by, about twice or 2 or 3 times, basically, since I was a student. We started talking about this. In fact, I mean, they started talking about it. I drew attention to it in one of my classes, and you know, the students were like, yeah, you know, da-da-da-da-da. And they said, well, let's get together after class and talk about this. So I thought, wow, this sounds really interesting. I'm going to go and listen, see what they say. And there were about 10 students there, and they started talking about their personal experiences of having to go to school and pay these tuition fees, the types of things that they had to do, right? Working part-time jobs during the summer, or full-time jobs, during the summer, or even, in many cases, I kid you not, full-time jobs while they're studying full-time. I've got lots of students who are regularly missing my classes because they're either too tired or because they have a shift at work. Right? And it's not the majority of students, but it's you know, it's at least regularly, at least a handful, and growing. So I think this is something really to be concerned about, obviously. But you know, these were people who, in their day-to-day activities, didn't have any space to think politically about what was happening to their bodies, about what was happening to their lives. But when provided a space to speak about their experiences, and to talk about their anxieties, their sleepless nights, their acid reflux, we're able to realize that these were actually not medical problems that they had. They were social problems. And just that, in and of itself, was politicizing, I think, for a number of people. You know, we haven't started bringing tuition fees back in New Brunswick, but I think that, or back down in New Brunswick, but I think that the first act of being able to do that, to carry the load of turning things around, right, of resolving the problems that we face, whether those problems are inequality or climate change or what have you, is being able to recognize our individual experiences as collective problems, not just private troubles, but public issues. I think the Occupy movement kind of did this too, created spaces where people could talk about their private troubles. And I think actually that the more that we open spaces to do that in the future, in whatever form that takes, the more we have opportunities to talk about our private troubles. We're going to see that actually a lot of those private troubles are public issues and not private at all.
Several concrete visions and changes have been offered here tonight, and I will try to take this one more other angle to this. First, I'd like to comment on the notion of reclaiming democracy. Reclaiming democracy assumes that we didn't live in a democracy. Democracy referring to its true meaning of self-governance, the power of the people, a government by the people and for the people. Democracy, if that is what we choose, needs, however, to be practiced every day to stay alive. And in reality, as Cornel White puts it, most of the time it comes down to a struggle to keep the ruling elite accountable to the normal people. But such accountability needs to be demanded. The other day on the radio, I heard someone say in reference to China that we don't have to forget how privileged we are to be able to express our opinions. This startled me, and to me, this somewhat reflected the attitude in our society. What does this say about our confidence, our respect, our dignity for ourselves and each and every other person? To me, a key change necessary is to grow an awareness of our rights. We all do have the basic right for expression. We are not subjects who were generously granted permission to speak by our feudal lords who own the land or ourselves. Based on the experiences with our current system here expressed tonight, it's clear to me that democracy and accountability is low and change is needed. Structurally, there are things that can be done to bring our current system closer to a true goal, or a goal of a true democracy. And several of these have been mentioned, such as proportional representation during elections being one of them. But a big problem seems to lie on a functional level, meaning our understanding of our roles as citizens and of the roles of our elected officials in a democratic society, and the expectations we bring along accordingly. As I said before, democracy needs to be practiced, and not just by going to the election poll every 4 years. Democracy also does not mean to go visit Mr. Albert every day, but it does mean to communicate, to question, and to challenge authority non-violently, and this on a daily basis, starting at home, in schools, in hospitals, with the media, etc. But in all those places, we can often see the exact opposite. Challenging the status quo, even asking questions, is often penalized. Blind obedience and faith in authority are counterproductive to the very idea of democracy. There's a smart but true saying which states, "Those who sleep in a democracy wake up in a dictatorship." So if we want democracy, then we want our voices to be incorporated in policy and decision making. And we need our elected officials to be accountable. This only works in a two-way street. Elected officials will only become accountable if people demand it from them, and if they are not faithfully and blindly trusted. And this in turn requires for us to question and to challenge. So for me, it's clear that for change to happen, it will have to come from within. By abandoning blind obedience and faith in authority. And starting right here, right now, by the way we raise our children and by the way we understand ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, so here are some suggested changes to address the issues that I'd raised earlier. One of the things is to give the MLA something to do and make the Legislative Assembly actually work the way it's supposed to work. And what I mean by this is to actually create a system, the committees, recreate the committee system, committees of MLAs that are funded and have staff to hold public hearings on critical policy issues and around policy development, around legislation, to report publicly on that through Parliament. And in the process, the MLAs will learn and become informed and have the ability to increase their capacity. We need to expand the number of officers of the legislature, officers like the Auditor General who are accountable to people through the legislature, not to the governing party. Like Commissioner of Crown Lands, for example. If Crown Lands or the Public Forest in Brunswick are a public trust, then let's have a trustee accountable to the people through the legislature, or an environmental commissioner from the Conservation Council's perspective would be a priority. An officer of Parliament or the legislature. The second area would be to, in fact, give more power to local governments and make sure that everyone has a local government that they can participate in, whether they live in rural New Brunswick or in urban New Brunswick. On the issue of the urbans occupying politics, I think it's probably time for a royal commission. How about that? A royal commission on the structure and future of the New Brunswick economy. To take a serious look at this and you know, in all its dimensions, in a very public way. And then finally, with respect to accountability, at least in our thinking about it from the Conservation Council's perspective, I think it's time for an environmental Bill of Rights that builds real accountability into government and the public service and gives citizens and the rest of the community of life real rights before the law. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks. Great. Okay, so I'll try to summarize what I would say that if there was a banner under that one, it would say, "We want to participate." I mean, I think most of the suggestions really related to creating infrastructure to increase our capacity and our opportunities to participate. Jean-Claude talked about proportional representation, recall of MLAs, more independent officers, more grassroots organization, better and different ways to access the media. We talked about transparency, democratic reform came back. They talked about the pull factors, the push factors, participatory democracy. You catch the theme. Matthew talked about storytelling, sharing our experiences and making those private experiences public experiences, and so that we see them in a more social context, creating space for those opportunities to occur. And that participation comes from participating. If we don't practice democracy, you won't have a democracy. We need to question, communicate, and challenge. And David added to the opportunities for reform within the legislature. We've talked about municipal reform. I would say that's been a key theme, actually, so far, in terms of the opportunity to create grassroots participation and to engage citizens. And we talked about reform within the legislature itself to make the legislature more functional and creative and creating more opportunities for participation. So I'll open it up to the floor if folks wanted to start here and then go there. Sorry, I missed you again. Are you upset with me?
Well, no, I'm not upset. Yeah, well, kind of am.
Well, well, then you go there. Would you mind if you went first?
If you don't mind. And it's, I could have, I think, passed this in with the first presentation. I think it's a particular, Leah, your point in terms of the youth engagement. And I don't know how many of you have heard that it's the jeune francophone, the students, étudiants, jeune francophone, something like that. And I heard this high school student talking about, this francophone girl talking about the concept of lowering the voting age to 16. And I said, oh, come on, give me a break, that's insane. And then I listened to the arguments, or not the arguments, just the presentation that she made regarding, and I mean, a couple of things to say about this, but her research was quite remarkable, and I don't know really anything about this other than the fact that I heard this, and after hearing what she had to say, I thought, man, this really would be interesting to check out, because for a number of different reasons. Obviously, if you're young enough to drive, you feel someone riding down the street, my God, you may as well be able to come out at the voting booth, in a metaphorical sense. And the relationship between studying civics and history and stuff in high school, which of course we all just absolutely love, and just, we diligently, I'm sure, if we can all remember back that far, for some of us it was a little longer than us, but in any case, the reality is we learn about all this stuff, and then we don't practice it. And then we get out of high school, and then we go to university, and we're busy in one-arm paper hangers, or we're trying to survive in a who knows what kind of job, trying to figure out what we're going to do with our lives. And then maybe by the age of 25, we've gone to school or whatever, and we realize tax time. What? Oh, there's a vote happening? What's that all about? I remember something about that when I was back in high school. And I mean, voting, like most, I think, activities, is a function of, to a certain degree, habit and practice. And the tragedy of this next comment is, I think, in its absolute truth, is that we've got to capture a captive audience as a former high school, no offense, jailer, as a teacher. And I mean, here I'm dealing with these kids, it's your job to be here, and my God, if you leave, it's against the law. And we've got a captive audience there. We may as well use that opportunity to stimulate some discussion and perhaps create this habit and recognition that, hey, when I study here and educate myself about these issues, now that I've got all this free time on my hands, until life really comes up and kicks me in the face, it's a fascinating idea because it's actually done in other countries. And this is what I have no clue about, but I heard this kid mention this. I thought, man, I've overheard. In other countries, the level of engagement between the cohort of 18 to 25, which is absolutely null and void here, is, I don't know, much higher, shall we say, when that continues on, obviously, into higher. And I think this is a massively significant issue when you consider, when we look at, yeah, Europe's got its problems, but those problems are similar to ours, and I'm not sure how they relate per se to this particular issue, but I will tell you that Richard Black here, I'm sure some of you may have heard this gentleman's name before, he had a political science course at Woodstock High School, and 2 federal elections ago, he invited the 2 MPs in Tobic Mattapak to come and debate on a number of occasions, present their party's case and this sort of stuff, and debate the issues, and students study this. My God, and I would have loved to have been there. I know a reporter that covered it, and he said, man, you should have seen this, man, these kids were tearing these guys apart. And Mark Greenglass, who was a pharmacist from Plaster Rock, absolutely mopped the floor with Mike Allen in that grade 12 poli-sci class. And I thought, well, that's an interesting result. And Mark Greenglass, when he got out to the wider public, I'm telling you, man, this guy would have been fan-friggin-tastic. Anyway, I just throw that out there as an almost insane idea, because, come on, these are kids, right? What do they know? And the discussion that was presented, they're too impulsive. But voting is not an impulsive decision, unless it's a habitual one, and it's because my grandpa voted conservative 100 years ago. Well, I'm going to do it too. Well, please, come on. Anyway, I think I'd like to put that on the table for consideration. Thank you very much.
That's the kind of thinking outside the box we really, really, really have to do around here.
Roy Mullen from Moncton. I think in this province we end up eating fast food hamburgers here every day. And I talk about the media, because that's all we eat or all we consume is Irving media. So we have decades and decades of misinformation. And I want to thank Roy here about that 20 people, because I think they started a revolution in New Brunswick, and I really call that a revolution, because for once the people revolted against the ruling class, and there is a war going on. There's a war between.
And we're losing.
Well, exactly. Warren Buffett said his side is winning, and I think that's true. So, but there are some good signs of things happening, and one is in the press is that we're seeing the Purple Violet Press here in Fredericton. We've got Media Co-op in Fredericton. We have Moncton Free Press, which has started up in Moncton. We have St. John. There's a new Trinity Today that's starting up, and there's a number of different things. So that's very, very promising. So hopefully, if we could support those initiatives and move ahead, because those are the places where the story will get out for sure. Now, secondly, is the Facebook thing, and that's There is a
We wouldn't have had 35,000 people.
well, that's right, and there are other mobilizing things that have taken off since that, and we have won victories about that, and we're fighting battles in Moncton about Moncton High School, and we're taking on the government for stupid decisions, and so there are a lot of good things, and there's other new things going on in pesticide, cosmetic pesticides, and all sorts of things. So that, now the question is, how do you reach out from Facebook to reach enough people? So because I think we're all in silos in Facebook. There's people that want to protect trees, and there's people that want to protect water, and so on, and none of them want to talk about the other issues. So I haven't quite figured out how to get into that. Yeah.
That's question number 3, and I can't wait to talk about
Okay.
Okay, so my lineup is here, 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 and here. That's the 4 I have in my view at the moment. If I've missed you, let me know. So, here.
I might take a little different perspective of this. If we're still kind of depending on the legislature and our democracy, it doesn't exist. I'm more in the opinion that I am living in a feudal system, and this is the Irvin's fiefdom. Bottom line. I can work my tail off at that legislature for making all kinds of changes. It's not going to happen for me. I can't see it. I have to take a different route that I have to go at the business end of it. It's a total controlling system, and we are dumbed down. The education system sucks, I know. I taught in it for many years, and it was forced. I did like the gentleman's idea over here, where I'm from. And please don't take me wrong, but I'm pretty sure they could run Hitler under the conservative banner and he would win. It has nothing to do with intelligence. You know, it's totally to do with where I work, how I work, who's my employee or my employer, right? I got to put food on the table. People don't understand that, for example, the Irvins own between 300 and 400 companies. There's nothing comes in or out of this province that they don't have a finger in, that they don't make money off of. They'll bust a union in a heartbeat. I'd be more out to get out and get with the union, even if I'm not a member of that union, in my way to get the message out. But I do want to give you my definition of insanity. Now, I kept listening to what was going on to the province, and every day, 15 times a day, I'd be going, oh my God, that's insane. Well, that's insane. So I hauled out the dictionary. I said, I better get a handle on this definition of insanity. You know, so I could be correct when I speak. So I hauled out my funk and wagnalls, because I like that funk and wagnalls words. And there it was, lo and behold, the definition of insanity is voting liberal or conservative and expecting a different result. Period. There is no difference between the two of them because they're owned and they're operated by one big family. It doesn't matter. You can go to your MLA till you die. You're not going to get in there. You're not going to get that way, in my opinion. I got to go at the financial end of it. When you hurt somebody financially, then they get the message. And that's how they're controlling the people in this province, too. Not to be negative, just to be a different perspective.
Okay, so there. I saw you up there.
More like an idea, I guess, and a question. The idea is to engage everybody with regards to your area of expertise is to form committees much like the high school system. If you care about the environment, you join the environmental committee. Being part of a province or, I guess, a community, you should engage. So much like all the panel was saying, we don't accept our responsibilities fully. So I guess that's, the idea is to try to, as Roy was saying also, how do we use Facebook? We have massive groups of people that want to participate. Nobody knows where to start. So how, I guess the question is, how do we make it happen? How do we empower the people using today's technologies and tools in order for the people to protect themselves against large institutions. And I'm from a corporation, I'm a businessman, but I have environmental thoughts and ideas, and I believe in protecting society. I don't like the way the game is set up. I don't like the way the system operates, but unfortunately those are the rules that guide the, let's call them the voting public, you know, right now. So how do we change the rules to the game? How do we create something better that everybody can agree upon that should be the new way of doing things? So that's my question to the panel, is how do we create change? We're all talking about the same problems, we're all talking about the same situations, all the inequalities and injustice in society towards individuals, towards groups of people, minorities. You know, no matter which way you frame it, and excuse my language, I wanted to say something, I trained myself, but how do we create change? We have the internet, that's one, you know, one tool that the people can communicate very quickly. You can get statistics very quickly, but how do you bring that about to the government? How do you bring that into the government? And I guess back to my idea is committees. I care about the water. I'm from Grand on the East Coast, and I've seen the water all my life. I care about all sorts of animals and plants. I really do care about the province. You know, not only that, social justice. There's a lot of issues that I do care about. I don't know